We will restore an on-premise SQL Server 2019 database backup onto Azure SQL Managed Instance. For that, what we'll do is like we will take a backup from on-premise SQL 2019 to a storage account, and then we will restore this backup on the storage account on Azure SQL Managed Instance. So what we'll do now is like we'll create a storage account which can be used for taking the backup. So let's click on create. I will select the resource group as JB underscore MI underscore SI. I will name this storage account as JB SI, which stands for South India, and then SQL backup. This is my storage account name, and I will select the region as South India. Selected. So what I'm going to do is like I'm going to select standard, recommended for most scenarios, general purpose VG account, and redundancy. I think I'm okay with locally redundant storage here. So let's click on next. So I will leave everything else here as default here. And as far as the access tier is concerned, again, it is going to be default, wherein I will select it as frequently accessed data and day-to-day usage scenarios. And then let me click on next. So here I will be having enable public access for all networks, and then routing preference would be Microsoft network routing. Let's click on next. So here everything else will be like default as of now. So let's click on next. Everything here would be again, it would be default. I'll not be having any tags here. So let me just verify it once. Resource group is JBMISI. Location is South India. The storage account name is JBSI SQL Backup. And everything else seems to be okay. So let me click on create. Let's wait for this particular deployment to complete. So the storage account is created now. Let's go to the resource. And what we'll do is like we will check for the containers, and then we will create a container inside this. So let's name this container as SQL backup, and then let's click on create. So it's created. So what we are going to do is like we are going to take the backup inside this storage container within this container SQL backup. Let's get into this container here, and then click on properties under settings, and then we'll copy this particular URL. We will be using this while taking the backup and also like restoring the backup, because the database backup file will be placed inside this container. So let's note it down here. Then what we'll do is like we'll go back to the storage account. And what we'll do is like we're under security plus networking. Let's go to shared access signature. And then as far as the allowed resource types are concerned, let's click on service, container, and objects. And what we'll do is like we'll click on generate SAS and connection string. So we have the details here. So what we'll do is like we will copy the required details from here. We will copy this SAS token. And also the blob service SAS URL. So what we'll do is like we will take a database backup using these details. Okay, now that we have the required details, what we'll do is like let's create a credentials on premise, and then let's try a backup using URL method to the storage account that we have just created, which is your JBSI SQL backup. So let's open the SQL Server Management Studio. And if you can see here, this would be the command that I'll be utilizing. So create credential, and then what we have to do is like basically put this URL here. You just need to copy this, and then you need to kind of replace this here. So that's the first thing as far as the credential is concerned. And after that, what we have to do is like we have to copy this SAS token, excluding the leading question mark. This is the most important thing. If you create with a question mark, it is going to fail. So you need to skip the first question mark, and then you need to copy everything else. So you just need to copy it and then paste it as far as the secret is concerned here. So just put that across here, and then let's execute this particular query. So let's execute that. So it is completed. So what we'll do is like we will refresh it and then go to security and then check for the credentials, and you will be able to see that whatever was created just now, that is placed under your security folder under the credentials folder. Now it is time to execute the database backup. So what I'm going to do is like I'm going to backup database JBDB, which is this database. I think it's close to 10 GB. So yeah, it is close to 9 GB. So what I'm going to do is like I'm going to execute this command, a simple command, backup database JBDB to URL, and then I'm just putting this particular storage location with the container, and then I'm specifying the backup file name here, which is JBDB underscore today's date, which is 21 October 2022, and then I'm using a with class for starts. That's going to tell me about the backup progress. If required, you can use copy only backup. It is completely as per your requirement. But since this is a demo for me, what I'm going to do is like I'm just going to execute this particular command now to take the backup. So let's execute that. Let's go to the message tab, and we are able to see that the backup has started now. So it's going to take some time, and let me pause the video as of now. Once it is completed, I will let you guys know. So the backup is completed fine. So if you look at it here, it basically tells like the backup is completed. So let's switch over to the storage account, and then let's look at the container. And then let's open this SQL backup container here. So if we can see here, the backup is completed, and the size is close to 2.54 GB. So what we'll do now is like we will connect to Azure SQL Managed Instance. Let's try connecting to it from the VM, and also from outside of the VM using the public endpoint. And then what we'll do is like we will restore this particular backup onto the Azure SQL Managed Instance that is created previously in South India region, and then we'll take it from there. We will connect to the Azure SQL Managed Instance using public endpoint, and then we will initiate the restore on the Azure SQL Managed Instance. So what we'll do now is like let's go to the Azure SQL Managed Instance, and then let's navigate to networking underscore security. And then what we'll do is like we will copy this public endpoint if it is not enabled here, and if you want to connect from the internet directly to this particular managed instance, then you will have to enable this public endpoint. So if it is disabled, the only way you can connect to this managed instance is via a server, an application server, or from a web server, which is basically created under the same VNet as your MI. So your MI can have several subnets. So let's consider this MI is created in a VNet. In our example, this South India managed instance is created in the virtual network JB underscore SI underscore VNet. And if your endpoint, if public endpoint is disabled, then the only way to connect to this managed instance would be from a server or an application that is basically configured under this particular VNet. That is the only option that you will be able to connect. But in case if this public endpoint is enabled, which is enabled in my case, you will be able to connect from the internet if you basically use this particular endpoint name here. So let's copy that. And then what we'll do is like we will try connecting to it from my desktop. So this one is basically like I'm trying it from my local computer. So let's key in the password. Then let's try connecting to the managed instance using the public endpoint. Okay, so we were not able to connect to it. We basically got an error. So the error is cannot connect to the Azure SQL Managed Instance. It's a normal network related or instance specific error. A connection attempt failed because the connected party did not properly respond after a period of time. So let's check the networking tab as far as the managed instance is concerned. So what we are seeing is like there is a rule here that basically tells like this option requires port 3342 to be open for inbound traffic. You will need to configure NSG rule for this port. So what I will do is like we will try adding this 3342 port for this particular NSG. So what I'm going to do is like I'm going to look at this particular NSG. So what I'll do is like I will go back to the resource group here, which is JPMISI. And then what I'll do is like I will go for this particular NSG. So let's look for the network security group. So this is the network security group for my managed instance. So let's click on that. And then what I'll do is like I will go to inbound security rules and then let's add it here. So let's click on add, and what I'm going to do is like I'm going to put in the port here as 3342, and then I'm going to add this as an priority of 105, and then I will mention it as MI public endpoint. So let me save that. So what I'll do is like let's add this, and then what we'll try is like we will try a connection across to the managed instance from the SQL Server Management Studio. So it is created now. Let's try a connection using the SQL Management Studio. Let's try connecting to it. This is the same one. If you can see here, it is a public endpoint. So let's click on connect after we have added 3342. So now this time I'm able to connect to the managed instance from my local system. It's not an Azure VM or something, or a machine that is basically added on the same VNet as the SQL managed instance. So let's look at the networking section, or as far as the NSG rules are concerned. Let's look at the inbound security rules. What I've done is like under 105 priority, I've added this 3342. But if you look at it here, basically like there is a priority of 1300 where we have the same 3342 port, and the only thing is like the source here is basically Azure Cloud. And in my case, since this is an demo system, I basically added any but what we can do is like we can provide the IP address of this particular local system, and that will make sure like we'll be able to connect to it. So you can have one rule, but just for demo I've made sure like I've created one more rule so that everyone can understand what is going on. Okay, just wanted to show how we can connect to the Azure SQL Managed Instance using the public endpoint from your local system or from the internet. But what I'm going to do is like I'm going to connect back to the Azure VM, which is part of the virtual network where we have this Azure SQL Managed Instance, and then I'm going to initiate the restore there. So before that, what I'll do is like I will copy this credential, which I'll be using for creating it in the managed instance. Remember, this is the same thing that we created on the on-premise server to perform the backup from on-premise SQL 2019 server to the Azure storage account. So what we will do is like we'll create the same credentials on the Azure SQL managed instance, and once after that, what we'll do is like we'll try restoring the database backup that is present in the storage account. Let's do that. Okay, so we have logged into the Azure VM, which is a jump server, and I've connected to the Azure SQL managed instance that is created in South India region. So we don't have any database right now. So what I'll do first is like I will create a credential. So if you look at it, it's the same credential that we created on the on-premise, basically to take the backup to the storage account. Now what you're going to do is like, we will create the same credentials here where the backup file is present. So let's execute that. So it is created. So let me refresh it. Let's go to the security and then look at the credentials. So we have the credentials created, which is same as this one. So now what we'll do is like we will restore this particular database backup onto this Azure SQL managed instance. So let's execute that. So let's see if it is going to start. So it is basically telling one or more of the options stats are not supported for this statement in Azure SQL managed instance. So what we'll do is like let's try removing this command with stats is equal to 0 is equal to 1, and then let's try executing that. So now what I'm able to see is like I'm able to see that the restore is started. Let's refresh it. The database is not yet created. So yeah, let's try querying the DMV sysdm exec request. Yep, we have a restore database going on. So let's try predicate there for restore database. There's you can't. Here it is. So what we'll do is like let's do a percent. Yep, percent complete, and then let's execute it. So it is basically telling 0% complete. Let's try refreshing it. Okay, it's showing us like okay, by now it is completed. So if you see here, the restore has completed and we have the database here. So let's look at the database. Yep, we have the database created. The size is same as 9076 MB, and yep, the compatibility level is set to 2019. So let's change it to SQL Server 2022 now that we have restored it on the managed instance, and then let's also enable so query store is also enabled. So let's click on OK. So now we have the database created here. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Jai Hind.